Over the course of the project, we organized 26 meetings with distributors and potential buyers.
Right now, Vietnam is very well positioned in Southeast Asia as a country that attracts a lot of FDI and a lot of dynamism in the region.
Some companies were looking for distributors, but others wanted to meet directly and customer, potential buyers, or even strategic partners.
Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. In today's video, we're going to discuss about trade delegation, and we're going to take an example how we have been supporting an European trade delegation here to Vietnam a couple of weeks ago. Trade delegation is basically for a lot of different agencies, right? They can be governmental owned, promoting their own ecosystem to try to bring foreign companies to oversee markets, mostly for sales and for growth, but it can also be related to private trade organizations that their business models is actually to work with close regional stakeholders to also promote products and services. And Vietnam is right now positioned well in Asia as a key gateway for foreign companies to enter that dynamic ecosystem and to grow. And the way to approach that market entry strategy could actually be to send delegates. Phuong, it's a pleasure to have you today. We are right now in Ho Chi Minh City. Can you share us a little bit about FVSource and that previous delegations that you have been supporting?
Thank you, Guillaume, for inviting me today to share about the European delegation projects last month. I'm from FVSource. FVSource is a market entry agency conducting outsourcing, manufacturing services, and support many SMEs from Europe to find or identify Vietnamese partner in Vietnam. And we supported 4 companies from European country last month. And now I will share with you this delegation projects.
Right now, Vietnam is very well positioned in Southeast Asia as a country that attracts a lot of FDI and a lot of dynamism in the region, obviously because of the China plus one relocation of supply chain, but also because there is an increased demand from imported products and services. So it's great that you can go through the fundamental of this previous delegation and what was basically the objectives of those 4 delegates coming here to Vietnam.
This delegation brought together 4 companies from Europe operating in very different industry, from construction air system, industrial air technology, winery, and even electrical industry. And although they came from very different industry, they all shared a common objective. They wanted to better understand about the Vietnamese market, identifying potential business partner, and of course gain insight into how their industry can operate locally. And our role was to help them maximize their time in Vietnam by connecting them to the right partner, and as well as creating meaningful business conversations. Over the course of the project, we organized 26 meetings with distributors and potential buyers such as contractors, wholesaler, and even industrial end users, industry associations, and other relevant stakeholders.
Yeah, I guess you have not only look at the end buyer, but also make an understanding about case by case what the companies are looking for, what their ultimate goal into coming to this Vietnam trip to also spread a certain awareness and then get insight from the local market, and also go through the governmental, I would say, kind of core, right? Maybe Chamber of Commerce as well as local associations that are supporting the local industries. So I will be interested to learn more about that and what was actually the process behind the scene, because 26 meetings seems quite a successful outcome, but what was really all the groundwork that the team have done?
Actually, everything starts with understanding the client's profile and their projects. Before researching any potential contact, we have to spend more time to learn each company's products, positions, objectives, and expectation for the trip. Some companies were looking for distributors, but others wanted to meet directly and customer, potential buyers, or even strategic partners. So we also needed to understand their exact customer profile, target industry, competitive advantages, and expense goals. And without that understanding, it's impossible to identify the right partner or stakeholders.
That's very important what you have just shared, Fung, because Vietnam is also quite a competitive market. In some key industries, you have a lot of products that are directly already imported and distributed locally, and that can be made in China or that can be made in South Korea and Japan. And with the close border that those countries have and the regional awareness that Vietnamese buyers have toward those brands and products, obviously the competition is huge when you consider it from a European or a US perspective. So I think what you have shared about understanding the value proposition, how is the competition also locally present here in Vietnam, makes a significant impact down the line, because okay, you know who to speak to and you know also how to approach the relevant stakeholders. And also linked to this, I think what is very important here is the translation, because sometimes you may send outreach email, you may send information in English to local stakeholders here. They can be distributors, wholesalers, or even factories, and sometimes you don't get answers. How this understanding and how is this localization of the documentation is also important in any project.
One step often overlooked is localization. That's why we review our company presentation first, brochures, technicals, document, catalog, and product information detailedly. Then we adapt it and translated key materials to Vietnamese or bilingual format. And this is really important because local companies often need to quickly understand about who the foreign company is or what they offer and why a meeting would be valuable. A well-translated value propositions can significantly improve response rates during outreach.
That's good to know that localizing material is also very important to secure meetings for such delegates. And then I think just in any foreign markets, people here expect documentation that could be as smooth as possible. And how was basically the work behind the scene from maybe a pure marketing perspective to do that groundwork and to do all of the translation documentation for the peers that were coming?
Actually, at FVSource, we have a marketing team that have a professional in translating technical documents for many industries. Therefore, the team has process to translate every material from European company to give me, and then the team outreach can understand correctly the material to outreach for the Vietnamese partner. One example that I can share is one of the Vietnamese partner in air technology for paper mills. When they look the material, they feel the material is really well because the languages for technical document is quite great for their industry.
Thanks for sharing about this example, Fung. So what is also very important from this project is actually that all the four companies, they are not in the same sector. So how have been you doing the work to tailor trips and to tailor the approach case by case? Because I guess their needs were totally different from one company to another one.
It's true, Guillaume. The four companies have four different itineraries. So after translation the materials. The next phase was market analysis and stakeholder mapping. For each company, we map the relevant ecosystem in Vietnam. Depending on their industry, this included distributors, importers, contractors, manufacturers, or industrial end user, and as I said, even industry associations. Because the four company operated in completely different sectors, we essentially had to build for separate market maps.
So to be able to secure 26 meetings, I guess you had to contact hundreds of companies. Some of them were probably not interested, some of them were not the right fit, some of them had already certain products that they were distributing or buying. So you need to start with a long database and long list to be able in the end to secure relevant meetings. How have you done that?
Many people think that success comes from the large database, but in reality, success comes from having the right long list, the right partner long list. For every organization in Vietnam, we evaluated relevance to the client objective, market position, distribution capability, industry influence, geographic coverage, and even we also evaluated decision-making authorities and potential business fits. One of the biggest lessons from this project was that data quality matters more than data quantity. A good example was an electrical solution company in that delegation project. Interestingly, this company had one of the smallest targets of database among the four companies, but it achieved one of the strongest conversion rates. The reason was simple. The target list was highly focused and carefully qualified from the beginning stage. That reinforced a lesson we see repeatedly: a smaller and highly quality list often perform much better than generic database.
Thank you for sharing about that. Something very important in Vietnam that is probably quite unique to comparing to other markets is that geographically speaking, it's quite fragmented. So sometimes when you want to import products and distribute products in Vietnam, you need to look at two main clusters, the north and the south. The north around the capital city and then the south around Ho Chi Minh City. So I think that geographic coverage that you just highlight is very important and should be always done first before you approach any market entry project. So you make sure that you go through the regional area that actually have relevant parties. So that's something very important. And I guess also the key decision-making process in some companies may be more lengthy or comprehensive, which means that you also need to spend time into enriching that database to make sure that you are speaking to the right person. You don't speak to the procurement team of a factory if in the end you want to bring them a software or an innovative solution to reinforce and to make their internal process working better. So coming back to what you were explaining, you finalize the long list, you qualify it, then what happened next?
And this is where one of the execution work happens. We use many communication channels, including direct phone calls, emails, Zalo. Zalo is one of the popular social media in business in Vietnam. LinkedIn, industry referrals, and of course, existing business networks. One thing we have learned is that relying on just single channel is not enough. Some companies respond to email, but others respond only after a phone call, and some become responsive after a trusted introduction. That is one of the popular cultural in Vietnam. The outreach process involved hundreds of touch points over several weeks. Even after securing the positive response, the work wasn't finished because we have to continuing confirm schedule, planning itineraries, sending reminders, and preparing for both parties for the meetings. And finally, from more than 540 companies in long list, we secured 26 qualified meetings. That's less than a 5% conversion rate. And that's exactly why qualification is so important.
Okay, 540 in the long list for finally 26 meeting. Well, so that's a huge attrition rate from the groundwork that was done first to make sure to have a proper database, enrich it, qualifying it, doing some first calls. That's a huge gap that we can observe, which I think is just part of all these type of assignments. You need to work a lot for finding just a few good results that provide the real outcome for the trade delegates. Maybe we can stay more in that topic and in the challenges that are usually facing when you are doing this type of market entry work or finding partners, contacting partners, and bringing delegates here to Vietnam. Can you share maybe the first challenge that you have encountered?
One challenge is identifying the decision makers. The person listed on a website is not always the person responsible for evaluating new suppliers or new partnerships. That's why in many cases we had to navigate many and multiple departments before reaching the right person. Finding the right company is one challenge, but find the right person in that company is another.
It's true that the decision-making process in Vietnam take longer sometimes than in other markets. Relationship is important, so you can sometimes unlock doors that would remain closed if you don't have the right relationship or the right person or the right network that you can activate. That's something true. But also you have shared earlier, Fung, that you had to keep a certain momentum with the companies and to update them and to confirm meetings and to send reminders. Do you had any trade-off and any case that went wrong, maybe cancellation or last-minute change?
Even after meeting can confirm, schedule can change quickly at last minute. Because decision makers travel unexpectedly or internal priority shift or even projects enter critical process, and some meetings were delayed only days before the delegation arrived. And that's why we always prepare the backup plan or backup alternative options. A successful delegation should never depend on a single country or a single meeting.
I think you're right in terms of the backup plan. Always have a plan B. Always have available slot in your agenda so you can always move a meeting from 1 hour in case someone is busy at the time or have a last minute appointment. So finally, between the kickoff call to the delegation, how long have you had roughly?
Generally, we have 1 month to do these projects. Before starting, we allocate a timeline reasonably and effectively, because each industry or each company in different industry would have the different timeline to reach out effectively. For example, with winery industry, they are typical industry, need to straightforward and fast. That's why if you contact them too early, they may forget about the meeting. That's why we choose to contact them before 1 week is perfectly for winery companies or wholesaler. But for remaining industry companies from construction, paper mill, or electrical solution company, they need a formal meeting. That's why we have to reach out them early, because if you contact them too late, the schedule may be full or cannot arrange a decision makers for our partner.
Okay, it's great to know that it takes around 1 month of time to be able to organize all of these. I guess that if this is a same sector, it can take a shorter time because all the companies will be meeting the same stakeholders. having the same type of agenda, maybe even group visits. So I think it's relevant to allocate more time if this is really a different group of companies that need and then tailored assistance on the ground. And also something important is that decision-making process that you have just shared. Some wholesalers, it can be faster for them to take a decision. Or if sometimes clients also ask to speak directly to the C-level, the management team, that can finally make that decision. I think that's why there is often huge friction between the long list that you can build, that you can iterate on, but also the final result that can be brought for the delegates. Some takeaway, some good lesson learned, I guess, from this last journey. What was basically the success of that and the main takeaway from the team?
The first lesson is that data qualification is better than data quantity. We start with 540 partners, but only 26 meetings to complete for the delegation projects. Success was not about how many companies we contacted. It was about the right conversation and the right making decision. As you said, we have to contact the right person from C-level, because these people can make decision and make decision to meet the European company or not. The second lesson is that local insight matters. Understanding business culture, stakeholder network, industry structures, and communicate practices can significantly improve the effectiveness of market exploration. And market reports provide useful information, but real market understanding comes from conversation with people on the ground. And the final lesson is that the objective of a delegation is not simply to fill a calendar. The objective is to help companies understand the market, validate assumptions, identify opportunities, and make better strategic decisions. If a company returns home with greater clarity and actionable next steps, then the delegation has been successful.
Thank you, Fung, about that. I think it was great to understand what's behind the scene when you are supporting such a delegation. There can be small group of companies that are in the same sectors, but also, as we have shared today, multiple sectors, multiple companies, but coming with the same goal, understanding the market, meeting relevant partners here, and then bring business, because that's in the end what matters. European companies want to come here with certain KPIs, certain expectations. So it's also our role to fill it as a consulting company here locally grounded in Asia. It was great discussion, Fung, today. I will leave more details below in the description about our ranges of services. If you are looking into market entry support on the ground here in Southeast Asia with a strong focus on Vietnam, you find below more details about how we can support your organization or your peer in your area to come to Vietnam to sell and to distribute their goods or services. Thanks again, Fung, for your insightful sharing today.
Thank you, Guillaume, for inviting me today. I'm really happy to share about insight about the dedication projects. I hope that in the future I can support many projects like this dedication projects.
Thank you, Fung, and I see you in the next video. Thank you.